The cold always seemed sharper in the north, but that morning, it felt almost invigorating. Liam and I set out before dawn, our breath pluming in the headlights of the snowmobile as we loaded our gear. The world was a cathedral of frost and silent spruce trees heavy with snow, the sky a deep blue that promised a clear day. We'd planned this trip for months, eager to get away from the noise of the city and into the wild, where the only rules were the ones nature made. We rode for hours, the snowmobile humming beneath us, cutting a trail through untouched powder. By midday, we'd tracked a caribou herd near the frozen lake. Liam was the better shot, and he proved it again. One clean shot, and the bull went down. We whooped and high-fived, adrenaline warming us despite the dropping temperature. We didn't know it then, but this would be the last moment of uncomplicated joy we'd share. We lashed the caribou to the sled and turned for home, the snowmobile straining under the weight. The wind was picking up, carrying the promise of a storm. I remember the way the sky changed, clouds rolling in, the sun vanishing behind a wall of gray. Then, without warning, the engine sputtered and died. Liam cursed and hopped off, checking the belt. It was snapped clean through. We were 40 miles from the cabin, with night coming on and the temperature plummeting. I tried to radio for help, but the cold had drained the batteries. Liam looked at me, his face set. "We walk," he said. There wasn't any other choice. We shouldered our packs and started walking, leaving the snowmobile and the caribou behind. The wind grew stronger, biting through our layers. Snow began to fall, at first gently, then in thick, blinding sheets. The world shrank to the circle of light from our headlamps. Every step was an effort, the snow deepening, our boots sinking to the shins. We tried to keep our spirits up, telling stories and making plans for hot coffee and dry socks. But the cold was relentless, seeping into our bones. My fingers went numb, then my toes. I flexed them constantly, trying to keep the blood moving. Liam's beard was a mask of ice. Kept checking the compass, but the needle spun uselessly in the storm. When darkness fell, it was absolute. We found a cluster of boulders and huddled behind them, trying to escape the wind. Liam fumbled with matches, but the wood was too damp to catch. We split a frozen energy bar, the chocolate shattering between our teeth. Above us, the aurora flickered green and purple, beautiful and cruel. We dug a shallow pit in the snow, piling our packs behind us as a windbreak. The cold pressed in, suffocating and absolute. We pressed close for warmth, but the ground sucked the heat from us. My jaw ached from chattering. Liam tried to joke, but his words slurred, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Sleep became the enemy. I knew if I closed my eyes, I might not open them again. I slapped my face, stomped my feet, anything to keep the blood moving. Liam drifted in and out, mumbling about summer and warm beaches. I tried to keep him awake, but he was slipping away. The wind howled, rattling the boulders. Ice crystals formed on my eyelashes, blurring my vision. I watched the sky lighten and darken again, time losing all meaning. I counted seconds, then heartbeats, desperate to stay awake. At some point I realized I couldn't feel my feet. At dawn we dug deeper, trying to make a snow cave for shelter. Our hands were raw, the snow biting into our skin. The cave was cramped, barely enough for the two of us. We crawled inside, our bodies pressed together, sharing what little warmth we had left. Liam's breathing was shallow, his skin pale and waxy. I tore open hand warmers, stuffing them into his gloves and boots. They fizzed weakly, barely generating any heat. I tried to keep talking, telling stories, singing songs, anything to keep us both awake. But Liam was fading. The cold became a living thing, gnawing at us. My shivering stopped, replaced by a strange, warm numbness. I recognized the signs of hypothermia, but there was nothing I could do. Liam stopped responding, his eyes half closed. I shook him, slapped his face, screamed his name, but he was gone. I held him, sobbing, my tears freezing on my cheeks. The silence was total, broken only by the wind. I wanted to sleep, to let go, but something inside me refused. I thought of my family, of home, of all the things I'd never see again if I gave in. Time lost meaning. I hallucinated voices, Liam's, my mother's, even the sound of a rescue helicopter that wasn't there. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision. Cold was inside me now, in my bones and blood. I sang nursery rhymes, my voice cracking, each word costing precious energy. At some point, I crawled out of the cave, desperate for movement. The world was blinding white, the sun a pale disk behind clouds. I fired my flare gun, the pop echoing in the silence. I waited, hope flickering, then dying. I don't know how long I lay there, half buried in snow, before I heard the distant roar of engines. At first I thought it was another hallucination. But then I saw them red parkas, ski-doos cresting the ridge. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. I waved weakly, and one of the rescuers spotted me. They pulled me from the snow, wrapped me in blankets, and loaded me onto a sled. I faded in and out, the world spinning. I remember the warmth of the rescue tent, the voices of medics, the sting of hot fluids in my veins. They told me I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I spent weeks in the hospital, recovering from frostbite and exposure. My fingers were blackened, my feet wrapped in bandages. I lost 2 toes, but I survived. Liam's funeral was closed casket. I spoke at the service, but the words felt hollow. Now, every winter, I taste iron in the air. The cold isn't just weather anymore. It's a ghost that follows me. A reminder of how close I came to disappearing into the white. Sometimes when the wind howls outside my window, I hear Liam's voice telling me I made it. Wonder why I did, and he didn't. I don't have an answer. But I keep moving. One step at a time, grateful for every sunrise. It was nearly midnight when I left my friend's house, the Minnesota winter, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I remember the warmth inside, the laughter, the way I hesitated at the door, not wanting to step into the cold. But I had work in the morning, and Dad would worry if I stayed out too late. The sky was clear, the stars sharp as knives, and my breath hung in the air as I made my way to the Chevy. The roads were empty, just me and the hum of the engine. I kept the radio low, the heater blasting. The world outside was a frozen wasteland, snowdrifts piling high along the ditches. Then, without warning, the car slid. My heart leaped as the tires lost grip. I tried to steer, but the Chevy spun, headlights sweeping across the fields. I ended up nose first in a snowbank, the engine sputtering, then dying. I was alone, miles from anyone. I sat in the car, shivering. The heater was useless now. I weighed my options. Wait for help that might not come, or try to walk to Wally's farmhouse 2 miles away. I thought about my parents, about the stories of people freezing to death in their cars. I wrapped my scarf tighter, grabbed my purse, and stepped into the night. The cold hit me like a slap. My breath froze in my scarf, my boots crunched on the snow. I kept my head down, focusing on each step. The wind howled, pushing against me, and the world shrank to the narrow beam of my flashlight. I counted my steps, recited prayers, anything to keep my mind off the cold gnawing at my skin. I lost track of time. My legs grew heavy, my hands numb. I thought I saw lights in the distance, but they vanished when I blinked. The snow was deeper here, drifting up to my knees. My thoughts slowed, my body moving on autopilot. I tried to remember why I was out here, what I was walking toward. My mind wandered to childhood memories, hot cocoa, warm blankets, my mother's voice. My flashlight slipped from my fingers. I tried to pick it up, but my hands wouldn't obey. I fell to my knees, the snow soaking through my jeans. I heard voices, my father calling, my mother singing, but they were far away. I lay down, too tired to care, and let the darkness take me. I drifted in a world of dreams and memory. Sometimes I was at home, safe and warm. Sometimes I was floating weightless, the cold, a distant thing. I saw faces my parents, my friends heard laughter, music, the sound of water boiling for tea. But always the cold returned, wrapping me tighter, turning my body to stone. Light. Voices. Hands lifting me, rough and urgent. I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't move. I heard my name, Wally's voice, frantic. I was carried, bundled, rushed through the night. I felt nothing. I wanted to tell them I was alive, but my lips wouldn't move. The world faded in and out, a blur of headlights and panic. Bright lights. The sting of antiseptic. I was laid out on a table, doctors and nurses moving around me, their voices sharp and worried. They tried to take my temperature, but the thermometer wouldn't register. My skin was hard, brittle. They couldn't get a needle in my arm. I heard someone say, "She's gone." But I wasn't. I was still there, trapped in my body, waiting. Slowly, painfully, warmth crept back. I felt pins and needles in my fingers, fire in my toes. My heart hammered, weak but steady. I opened my eyes to a blur of faces, my parents, the doctor, Wally. Tears froze on my cheeks. I tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "Cold," I said. Relief and disbelief filled the room. They called it a miracle. I called it survival. The days blurred together. Nurses checked my skin for frostbite. Doctors marveled at my recovery. I learned to walk again, each step a victory. My parents never left my side. The press called me the Ice Woman, but I just felt lucky to be alive. Lucky to feel the sun on my face, the warmth of a hand in mine. Even at under a fireplace, I still feel the cold in my bones. I see the moon on the snow, the endless road, the way the world can turn on you in an instant. I remember the hands that pulled me from the drift, the warmth of my mother's hug, the way the sun looked the morning I woke up in the hospital. I am Jean Hilliard, the Ice Woman of Minnesota. I am a survivor. The cold will always be with me, a shadow at the edge of memory, but so will the warmth that brought me back. Everest was never just a mountain to me. It was a promise, a test, a shadow that followed me from the moment I first saw its jagged silhouette in a photograph. Every decision, every sacrifice, every hour spent training in the Texas heat was for this, to stand on the roof of the world and look down at the curve of the earth. But as our team gathered at base camp, the mountain loomed above us, silent, indifferent, and impossibly vast. I felt its weight in my bones, even as I tried to laugh with the others and hide my fear. Climbing Everest is a study in patience and pain. We spent weeks acclimatizing, moving between camps, forcing our bodies to accept the thin air. Each step above 20,000 feet was a negotiation with my own limits. My fingers tingled, my lips cracked, and my dreams were filled with the sound of wind and ice. I missed home peach, my children, the warmth of Texas sun. But I pushed those thoughts away. On Everest, distraction could kill you. Camp 4, the South call it 26,000 feet. They call it the death zone for a reason. The air is so thin, your body is dying by degrees. We left for the summit before midnight, headlamps bobbing in the darkness, oxygen masks hissing. Every breath was a struggle, every step an act of will. I tried to focus on the crunch of my crampons, the rope in my gloved hand, the line of climbers snaking up the ridge.
Above us.
The summit was a pale ghost in the starlight. Somewhere above the balcony, I felt a strange haze drift across my right eye. I blinked, rubbed at my goggles, but the world only grew dimmer. Panic crawled up my spine. By the time I reached the south summit, my vision was nearly gone. I told Rob Hall, my guide, but he was focused on the summit push. "Wait here," he said. "We'll get you on the way down." I nodded, trying not to let fear show, and huddled in the snow as the wind screamed around me. Time lost all meaning. The cold gnawed at my bones, my hands and feet numb, my face burning with wind and sun. I tried to stand, fell, tried again. The mountains spun around me. I shouted for help, but the wind stole my voice. I was alone, blind, and freezing. I thought of Peach, of my children, of all the things I'd never say. The cold crept deeper, promising sleep. The storm came suddenly, a white wall of snow and wind. I heard voices, other climbers, lost and desperate, but I couldn't see them. I curled into myself, trying to stay awake. My mind wandered. Childhood memories, regrets, the faces of those I loved. I felt myself slipping away, the cold, a gentle thief. I wondered if anyone would find me or if I'd simply vanish into the mountain, another ghost among many. They found me at dawn, buried in snow, my face black with frostbite. Someone checked my pulse. "He's gone," I heard. They left me there, a body among bodies, but I wasn't dead. I was trapped inside myself, aware but unable to move. I drifted between worlds, live in a dead man's body. The cold was a cage and I was its prisoner. Something inside me rebelled. I thought of Peach, of my children, of everything I'd lose. I forced myself to move, to crawl, to fight. Inch by inch, I dragged myself toward camp, hands frozen, face unrecognizable. The pain was blinding, but it meant I was alive. I refused to die on this mountain. Each movement was agony, but also hope, a reminder that I still had a choice. They saw me staggering into camp, half-blind, frostbitten, barely human. The doctors shook their heads. "It's a miracle," someone whispered.
How my friends wept.
I was flown off the mountain, my body broken but my spirit burning. The descent was a blur of pain and relief, of gratitude and guilt for those who didn't make it. I thought of Rob Hall, of Doug Hansen, of Yasuko Nam, the friends lost to the storm. Survivor's guilt gnawed at me, even as I clung to life. In the hospital, I learned the cost of survival. My hands were ruined, my nose gone, my face forever changed. I faced surgeries, months of recovery, and the long, slow process of forgiving myself for surviving when others did not. The nightmares came of wind, of cold, of the mountains' indifferent silence. But Everest had given me something too: clarity, humility, a fierce love for life. I learned that survival isn't just about the body, it's about the will, the heart, the people who wait for you. I am Beck Weathers, was left for dead on Everest, but I came back. The mountain is still there, and so am I. The ice on Lake Michigan always spoke in creaks and groans, but that morning, it was silent, too silent. I'd been fishing these waters since I was a boy, but something in the air felt off. The sky was a hard, pale blue, the wind sharp enough to cut. I set my shanty, drilled my holes, and waited for the first bite. When the sun was high, I heard it. A deep, echoing crack that seemed to run beneath my boots. I froze, rod in hand, as the ice trembled. It happened fast. One moment I was anchored, the next I was moving slow at first, then faster, the ice floe breaking away from shore. I scrambled out of the shanty, heart pounding, and saw the widening ribbon of black water between me and land. Panic clawed at my throat. I yelled, but the wind swallowed my voice. I was alone, drifting. I forced myself to breathe and take stock. My shanty, a battered axe, a small bag of food, and a single frozen trout. No radio, no way to call for help. I checked my pockets for matches 3 in a damp box. I wrapped myself in every layer I had, the cold already gnawing at my fingers. The sun was dropping, and with it, the temperature. I built a small fire in an old coffee can, the flames of fragile comfort. Night on the lake is a world apart. The wind howled, rattling the shanty walls. I huddled inside, listening to the ice groan and shift. Every sound was a threat, a reminder that my raft could shatter beneath me. I tried to sleep, but the cold kept me awake. My mind wandered to home. My wife's laughter, the warmth of our kitchen, the stories I'd tell if I made it back. By morning, the fire was out and my food nearly gone. I gnawed at the frozen trout, the flesh icy and bland. My stomach cramped, but I forced myself to eat. The sun offered no warmth. I tried to chop a path to shore with the axe, but the ice was too thick, the water too wide. I shouted until my throat was raw, waving my arms at distant boats that never saw me. A storm rolled in, gray and merciless. Snow lashed the shanty, piling against the walls. I patched leaks with old rags, praying the wind wouldn't tear the roof away. My hands were numb, my feet blocks of ice. I burned scraps of wood, rationing every match. The world shrank to the flicker of firelight and the sound of my own breathing. On the third night, I heard them howls, distant at first, then closer. Wolves, drawn by the scent of fish and desperation. I gripped the axe, heart hammering, and peered into the darkness. Their eyes glowed at the edge of the firelight, hungry and patient. I kept the fire burning, feeding it anything I could find. The wolves circled, but did not attack. Their presence was a reminder. Out here, I was prey. The fifth day delirium set in. I saw shapes on the horizon. Ask you, I thought, but when I called out, the wind mocked me. My lips were cracked, my voice a whisper. I knew I couldn't last much longer. When the wind shifted, it pushed the floe closer to shore. I seized my chance, lashing the shanty door as a makeshift sled. I crawled, inch by inch, across the groaning ice, the axe in one hand, the trout in the other. My arms shook, my vision blurred. Crawled over the last stretch, boots breaking through slush. When I finally reached solid ground, I collapsed, gasping. My hands were blue, my skin burned with frostbite. I staggered toward the lights of Cross Village, every step a victory. I carried nothing but the axe and the frozen trout, proof of my ordeal. The warmth of the village was overwhelming. Voices, blankets, hot broth pressed to my lips. My story spilled out in fragments. The crack, the drift, the wolves, the endless cold. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I'd lost feeling in 2 fingers, but I kept my life. Sometimes when the wind howls at night, I hear the ice crack and remember the lake's cold embrace. But I survived. Every winter when I walk the shore, I remember what it means to come home. The mountains of Norway were a canvas of white that day. The sky a sharp, cloudless blue. My skis cut through fresh powder as I followed my friends toward the waterfall of frozen sculpture we de-skied past a dozen times. Laughter echoed in the crisp air. We were young, invincible. The cold, just a backdrop to our adventure. I remember the sun glinting off the ice, the thrill of speed as I pushed ahead, unaware that the snow beneath me hid a trap. The waterfall's edge approached faster than expected. I tried to brake, but the slope was sheer. My ski caught a hidden rock, and suddenly, I was tumbling not down the mountain, but through it. The world vanished in a shock of cold and darkness, as the ice gave way beneath me. Water swallowed me whole, violent and gelid. My body convulsed, lungs burning for air as the current dragged me under the ice shelf. I clawed upward, but my hands met only solid rock-hard ceiling. Panic seized me. I was a rat in a frozen maze, disoriented and drowning. The waterfall's roar muffled my screams. No one could hear me. I forced myself into a crevice, my head briefly breaking the surface. Gulping air, I saw the horror. A pocket of air no larger than a dinner plate, surrounded by impenetrable ice. My legs dangled in the current, already going numb. I braced my arms against the ice, fighting to keep my face above water, knowing this tiny pocket was my only lifeline. Minutes bled into eternity. The cold wasn't just cold. It was a living entity, chewing through my wetsuit, gnawing at my bones. My fingers turned wooden, useless. I focused on breathing, shallow sips of air, each exhale a plume of fog in the dim light filtering through the ice. Stay still, I told myself. Conserve energy. But the current tugged at me, whispering promises of surrender. My thoughts drifted to my medical residency, ironic that I'd studied hypothermia, never imagining I'd become a textbook case. I recited symptoms in my mind. Slurred speech, confusion, paradoxical undressing. The clarity was a small victory. Then, a new terror. The air pocket was shrinking. Meltwater dripped onto my face, the ceiling sagging under its own weight. Strength ebbed. My arms trembled, then failed. The water closed over my head again, black and final. This time, there was no fight, left only a strange, icy peace. This is how it ends, I thought. My body went limp, surrendering to the current. Memories flickered, my mother's voice, summer hikes, the smell of pine. Then light. Hands grabbed my harness, hauling me upward. My friends' faces blurred above me, pale, frantic. I tried to speak, but my jaw was locked. 80 minutes, someone later said. I'd been dead weight in the water for 80 minutes. I awoke to chaos. Snowmobiles, flashing lights, a helicopter's thunder. My body was a statue. I couldn't feel my limbs. A medic cut away my wetsuit, his face grim. No pulse, he muttered. They bundled me like cargo, racing against time I no longer possessed. In the helicopter, a doctor pressed a stethoscope to my chest. His eyes met Mina, flicker of shock. I saw that look, I thought. He's seen a ghost. My vision tunneled. The last thing I heard was his shout. She's in a systole. Get the ECMO ready. The hospital was a blur of white and steel. I floated outside myself, watching doctors swarm my body, tubes in my neck, needles in my veins. My core temperature was 13.7 degrees Celsius, they said. Clinically dead. A machine breathed for me, pumped my blood, warmed it degree by glacial degree. I felt nothing but a distant hum like a fridge motor. Once a nurse squeezed my hand. "Can she hear me?" she wondered aloud. I screamed yes, but my lips were stone. Pain announced my return to life, a searing agony in my hands and feet, as if they'd been dipped in molten lead. The ECMO machine whirred beside me, its tubes like alien roots in my flesh. Doctors hovered, murmuring about nerve damage, amputation risks. I dreamt of fire and ice. One moment, I burned in a desert. The next, I drowned in the waterfall again. When I finally opened my eyes, my mother's face swam into view, tear-streaked, smiling. Her hand was warm. Real. Recovery was a war. My hands were claws, my feet useless stumps. Physical therapists bent my frozen joints, their touch like knives. I learned to walk again, to hold a spoon, to write my name. Each victory was tempered by loss. The nerves in my hands were dead, they said. I'd never suture a wound again. Worst were the nights. I'd wake gasping, convinced I was back under the ice, the water filling my lungs. My roommate, a car crash victim, would hold me until the panic passed. Months later, I stood on a mountain again. Not skiing, just breathing. The wind bit my cheeks, but I welcomed it, proof I was alive. My hands, gloved and clumsy, brushed against a frozen stream. I recoiled, then forced myself to touch the ice. Didn't win, I told it. Back at the hospital, I switched specialties from surgery to anesthesiology. My hands might lack finesse, but I could still save lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. I, who'd cheated death, now guarded others on its threshold. Today I run marathons. My feet ache in the cold, a permanent reminder, but they carry me. Strangers recognize me, the woman who froze to death, and ask how it felt. I tell them it felt like peace, but peace isn't the same as surrender. The waterfall still freezes each winter. Sometimes I visit, tracing the ice that once entombed me. I feel no fear, only gratitude. Death had me in its grip, but life pulled me back. Now, when the world feels heavy, I remember I am Anna Bagenholm. I am the ice, and I am the thaw. Christmas morning always brought a special kind of magic to our little Swedish village by the sea. I woke before dawn, the world outside still wrapped in blue shadows, and pressed my nose to the frosted window. The ocean glittered beyond the snowy cliffs, wild and endless. I could hear my parents downstairs, their voices soft and warm, the smell of cinnamon buns drifting up the stairs. But my mind was elsewhere, on the stories of treasure and adventure I'd heard the night before. I dressed quickly, pulling on my thickest sweater and boots, and tiptoed outside before anyone noticed. The snow crunched under my feet as I made my way toward the cliffs. The wind was sharp, but I barely felt it, my heart pounding with excitement. I was a pirate, a treasure hunter, and the sea was calling. The cliffs loomed above the churning water, their faces streaked with ice. I picked my way along the path, careful but bold, scanning the rocks below for any sign of hidden gold. The sky was a pale, cloudless blue, the sun just beginning to rise. I felt invincibly untouchable, as if the world belonged to me alone. But the ground was slick, the snow hiding patches of ice. My boots slipped, and suddenly I was falling, tumbling down the steep face, toward the sea. The world spun, sky and stone and water blurring together. I landed hard, pain exploding in my side, and slid into the freezing surf. The cold was like nothing I'd ever felt, sharp, electric, 1,000 needles piercing my skin. I gasped, the breath stolen from my lungs, and tried to scream. The waves crashed over me, dragging me under, spinning me in the darkness. I kicked and clawed, desperate for air, but the cold was everywhere, seeping into my bones. Somehow I broke the surface, coughing and choking, my arms flailing. The shore seemed impossibly far away, the cliffs rising like prison walls. I tried to swim, but my limbs were heavy, slow, as if the sea itself was pulling me down. I called for help, my voice lost in the roar of the wind and water. Time lost all meaning. Cold numbed my body, dulled my mind. I floated half awake, the world shrinking to the rhythm of the waves and the pounding of my heart. My thoughts wandered to my mother's face, to the warmth of the kitchen, to the stories I'd heard of children lost at sea. I wanted to sleep. The urge was overwhelming, sweet and dangerous. I closed my eyes, letting the water rock me, the cold no longer an enemy, but a gentle hand. I dreamed of sunlight on snow, of laughter, of home. Somewhere far away, I thought I heard voices calling my name. Back in the village, panic took hold. My parents discovered my empty bed, the back door ajar. Neighbors gathered, voices tight with fear as they searched the cliffs and the shoreline. The rescue teams arrived, their dogs barking, their flashlights cutting through the early morning gloom. They found my footprints, the marks where I'd slipped, and the place where I'd vanished into the sea. The searchers called my name, their voices echoing over the waves. They feared the worst, but they did not give up. Hope, like the winter sun, was faint but unyielding. Below the waves, I drifted in a world of blue and gray. My body was numb, my thoughts slow and distant. I saw strange shapes in the water, fish darting past, ribbons of seaweed, the glint of sunlight far above. I felt no pain, only a deep, aching cold. I thought of my parents, of Christmas mornings past, of the warmth I'd left behind. I wanted to go home, but the sea was too strong. My heartbeat slowed, my breath faded. I let go, sinking into the quiet, the darkness closing around me like a blanket. Hours passed before they found me, my small body floating near the rocks. I was pulled from the water, limp and blue, my heart silent. The rescuers worked in silence, their faces grim. They wrapped me in blankets, rushed me to the ambulance, and drove through the snow to the hospital. The doctors fought for me, their hands steady, their faces set. They warmed my body degree by degree, refusing to give up. My mother held my hand, her tears falling on my frozen skin. The machines beeped, the lights blurred, and somewhere in the distance, I heard someone whisper my name. I hovered on the edge of life and death, caught in a world of dreams and memory. I saw my family, my home, the Christmas tree glowing in the window. I heard music, laughter, the sound of waves on the shore. I floated above my body, watching the doctors work, feeling their hope and their fear. The night was endless. My heart beat once, then again slow and uncertain. The warmth crept back, painful and bright. I wanted to wake, to open my eyes, to tell my mother I was still here. But the cold held me fast, a shadow at the edge of my dreams. Morning came, pale and silent. I opened my eyes to the blur of hospital lights, my mother's face hovering above me. Her hand was warm, her voice soft and trembling. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my body heavy and strange. The doctors called it a miracle. They told my parents I had been dead. My heart stopped, my body frozen. But I was alive. I remembered the sea, the cold, the darkness, but also the light, the warmth, the voices that called me home. I squeezed my mother's hand, and she wept with joy. Weeks passed before I was strong enough to leave the hospital. The village welcomed me back with tears and laughter. The story of the girl who froze in the sea spreading like wildfire. I walked along the cliffs, the wind in my hair, the ocean glittering below. The world was sharper, brighter, every moment a gift. I still dream of the water, sometimes the cold, the darkness, the strange peace that comes before waking, but I am not afraid. I am Stella Berndtsson, the girl who froze in the sea and came back to tell the tale. The ocean is still wild and endless, but now I know. Even in its coldest depths, there is hope. The night was clear and impossibly cold, the kind of Icelandic winter that makes the ocean steam beneath the stars. I stood on the deck of the Hilliard VE503, boots slick with fish guts, breath fogging in the sharp wind. The North Atlantic stretched out black and endless, the waves glinting with moonlight. We were 5 men, laughter and stories rising above the engine's hum. The promise of a good catch in our nets and the comfort of home waiting ashore. But the sea is never just a backdrop here. It's a living thing, unpredictable and hungry. I felt it in my bones as we worked in unease I couldn't name. Still, I trusted the boat, trusted my mates, trusted the routine. We'd done this 100 times before. I'd never imagined that tonight the sea would decide to test the limits of flesh and will. It happened in a blink. A rogue wave rose out of the darkness, taller than the mast, and slammed into us with the force of a falling mountain. The hull shuddered, tilted, and then we were over nets, crates, and men tumbling into the freezing black. I hit the water hard, the cold a shock that stole my breath and turned my limbs to stone. The boat vanished, swallowed by the sea. I surfaced, gasping, salt burning my throat. I called out names lost to the wind. I saw two of my friends clinging to debris, faces white with terror. The others were gone. The water was so cold it felt alive, biting and relentless. I knew then, if I stopped moving, I would die. The shore was a distant, dark line on the horizon, possibly far, but my only hope? I kicked off my boots, stripped away what I could, and started to swim. My friends tried to follow, but their voices faded quickly, swallowed by the waves. I looked back once, saw nothing but black water and the glint of distant stars. The cold was a living thing, gnawing at my muscles, slowing my heart. I forced myself to keep moving, counting strokes, focusing on the rhythm of my breath. My mind wandered to my mother's kitchen, the smell of rye bread, the warmth of the stove. I clung to those memories as the sea tried to claim me. The hours blurred, my arms and legs moved on their own, mechanical and numb. The sea was a vast, indifferent graveyard. I thought of my crewmates, wondered if any were still alive, if rescue boats would find us in time.
Ow.
But I knew the truth. Out here, you are your own salvation. I began to hallucinate. Shapes danced on the waves, voices whispered in the wind. The pain in my feet and hands faded, replaced by a dangerous numbness. I remembered what I'd learned about hypothermia. When you stop shivering, you're in real trouble. I forced myself to shiver, to move, to fight the sleep that beckoned. I aimed for a faint light of farmhouse, maybe, or just a trick of my desperate mind. My body was shutting down, muscles locking, skin burning with cold. I could barely feel my arms, but I kept them moving, one after the other, each stroke a small rebellion against death. When the surf finally broke against my chest, I almost wept. My feet scraped volcanic rock, sharp and slick. I crawled, dragging my useless legs, the cold now a deep ache in my bones. I collapsed on the shore, gasping, the world spinning above me. But I couldn't stop. The wind howled, and the rocks beneath me were jagged, cutting my bare feet until they bled. My clothes froze to my body, stiff as armor. I stumbled forward, searching for shelter, for any sign of life. The landscape was alien black lava, patches of snow, the endless moan of the wind. I found a sheep trough, the water sealed beneath a crust of ice. I broke it with my fists and drank, the water so cold it burned. My feet were numb, leaving bloody prints in the snow. I thought of my family, of the warmth of home, and forced myself to keep moving. At last, a miracle, a distant light, warm and golden, flickering through the storm. I staggered toward it, each step a battle. My vision blurred, my breath ragged. I reached the door and pounded with the last of my strength. The farmer opened it, eyes wide with shock. He pulled me inside, wrapped me in blankets, and called for help. The warmth was agony, needles of pain shooting through my limbs as blood returned. I shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering, unable to speak. The farmer's wife pressed hot tea to my lips, her hands gentle and sure. I was safe, but the ordeal was far from over. They took me to the hospital where doctors and nurses gathered in awe. They expected frostbite, organ failure, maybe even death. But my body refused to give in. My temperature was low, but my heart was strong. The doctors called it a miracle, said I should have died a dozen times over. I slept for days, drifting in and out of dreams. I saw the faces of my friends, heard their laughter echoing in the halls. I mourned them, even as I marveled at my own survival. The nurses told me stories of other fishermen lost to the sea. None had lasted as long as I had. News of my survival spread quickly. Reporters came, asking how I'd done it, what secret I held. I had no answer, only the stubborn will to live, the refusal to let the sea have me. Scientists studied my body, searching for clues. They found nothing out of the ordinary, just a man who would not surrender. But I knew the truth. It was not strength or science, but memory and hope that carried images of home, the taste of bread, the sound of my mother's voice. The sea had tested me, but it had not broken me. I returned to the village, to my family, and the familiar rhythm of the tides. The scars on my feet healed, but the memory of that night never faded. I still walk the shore sometimes, feeling the bite of the wind, listening to the sea's restless song. People call me a legend, a miracle, but I am just a man who refused to freeze. Every winter, when the nights are long and the sea is black and cold, I remember. I remember the pain, the fear, and the stubborn, burning will to live. And I know that as long as I carry that fire inside me, I can face whatever darkness comes.